My cousin took credit for my work while I funded his startup, so I exposed everything and claimed the profits he thought were his. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been labeled the practical one in my family, the quiet problem solver who kept his head down and got things done. Meanwhile, my cousin Ethan was celebrated like he was some kind of prodigy, the golden boy with a brilliant mind, even though he never actually finished anything he started. I grew up watching him pitch half-baked business ideas at family dinners while everyone nodded like he was the next Steve Jobs, and I just sat there wondering why no one noticed the only thing he ever completed was a mood board. I chose software development because it felt safe, predictable, and honest. I liked building things that worked, even if nobody applauded it. I'd spend late nights making small tools and apps, nothing flashy, nothing viral, just solid work I could feel proud of. No one in the family cared or even asked what I was building, but that never bothered me. I wasn't doing it for praise. Then one afternoon, Ethan showed up at my apartment with the kind of dramatic entrance he always made, arms wide, grin too big, speaking before he even sat down. "Dude, I have an amazing idea," he said, dropping onto my couch like he owned it. "It's going to change everything. I just need someone technical to bring it to life." The way he said someone technical made it sound like he needed a screwdriver, not a human being. I remember hesitating, but only for a second. The idea of finally working on something meaningful, maybe even something we could both be proud of, hooked me. When I asked what my role would be, he waved his hand and said, "Easy. You build it. I'll handle the big picture stuff." And stupidly, naively, I agreed. I told myself it would be a partnership. A chance to finally be seen for what I could do. But looking back now, I realize my first mistake wasn't trusting the idea. It was trusting family and business at all. I didn't realize how quickly things would escalate until Ethan started talking about startup essentials like he was reading from a script. It began with him casually mentioning how he couldn't fully focus on the app unless he had some kind of financial cushion. I remember raising an eyebrow and asking, "What kind of cushion are you talking about?" He sighed dramatically, like I was the one dragging him down. "You know, tools, registrations, maybe rent for a proper creative space. Just until we launch." His tone made it sound like I was the unreasonable one for even questioning him. I told myself it was temporary, that investing a bit upfront made sense if we were building something real. So, I paid. First the software tools, then the LLC registration, then the deposit for the tiny co-working room he insisted was necessary for innovation. Every time I transferred money, I felt a small twist in my stomach, but I buried it under logic. "It's for both of us," I kept telling myself. Meanwhile, while I worked late nights coding, Ethan kept saying he needed to network. I'd hear him on calls pacing around the co-working space, throwing around buzzwords like scaling, vertical integration, and market disruption, none of which actually meant anything without a product. When I asked how the networking was going, he'd smirk and say, "Relax. This is how startups work." The worst part was how my family reacted. The moment Ethan mentioned he was launching a business, everyone lit up with pride. My mom even said, "He's always had that spark, you know? Some people are born leaders." No one asked about my work. No one even realized I was the one building the entire thing. At dinners, Ethan talked about his project, and I stayed quiet, telling myself the truth would matter eventually. But the real crack appeared when I noticed something shift in the way he spoke, how he slowly became I. And that was the moment I felt the first real warning that something was slipping out of my control. After months of sleepless nights and silent frustration, I finally finished the first fully functional version of the app. I remember staring at the screen, exhausted but proud, thinking, "This is it. We actually did something real." When I showed Ethan, he barely glanced at the code before launching into a speech about branding strategy, as if he'd personally brought it to life. "This is perfect," he said, tapping the screen like a producer giving notes. I knew my vision would work. My chest tightened hearing that, his vision. Not ours. Still, I told myself it didn't matter who said what. The work would speak for itself. But then came the family gathering where everything shifted. Ethan had prepared a whole presentation, slides, graphics, even a mock investor pitch, and I naively assumed he'd introduce me as his partner. Instead, he strutted into the living room and said, "Everyone, I want to show you the app I've been building." I felt the words hit me like a punch. I tried to step forward, but he shot me a quick glance, the kind that said, "Don't ruin this." So I stood there while he clicked through the prototype I built, describing technical features he didn't even understand. When my uncle asked how he coded a certain part, Ethan laughed and said, "Talent, man. Some people just have it." My hands literally curled into fists under the table. Afterward, I confronted him outside. "Why did you tell them you built it?" I asked, my voice shaking. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Bro, calm down. It's optics. People invest in leaders, not coders. Let me handle the spotlight." When I tried to push back, he added, "You're being sensitive. This is how the game works." But I saw something else in his tone: territorial pride. A sense of ownership over work he never touched. And right then, I realized this wasn't a partnership. It was the beginning of me disappearing from my own creation. Ethan showed up at my apartment one morning buzzing with a kind of manic excitement I'd never seen before. "Dude, get dressed," he said, barely stepping inside. "We've got a meeting with an angel investor today." I froze mid-sip of my coffee. "A meeting? Today? With who?" He waved dismissively, pacing in quick, jittery circles. "Doesn't matter. Big opportunity. Huge. Just follow my lead." Something in my gut tightened, like I was being dragged into a performance I didn't agree to. When we arrived at the investor's office, Ethan's energy shifted into something polished and theatrical. The lobby smelled faintly of cedar and cold air conditioning, and the floor-to-ceiling windows made the whole place feel intimidatingly transparent. I tried to steady my breathing as we were escorted into a minimalist conference room. The investor, a middle-aged man with gray streaks in his beard, greeted Ethan first with an enthusiastic handshake before turning to me like I was an extra in the background. "And this is," he asked. Ethan didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that's Mike, he helps with the technical side." "Helps." I swallowed the insult and sat down. The meeting began with Ethan launching into a pitch so smooth it was almost rehearsed. He walked the investor through the prototype, my prototype, and every time he used the word "I," something inside me flinched. When I tried to chime in about the back-end architecture, Ethan talked over me. When I attempted to answer a technical question, Ethan placed a hand on my arm and said, "I've got this." The investor nodded approvingly, clearly charmed by Ethan's confidence. By the end of the meeting, the investor leaned back and said, "I like what you're building, Ethan. I'm willing to offer a conditional investment assuming you maintain leadership." Ethan's face lit up with victory. Mine went cold. Walking out of that building, I realized Ethan had positioned me as nothing more than a tool, silent, replaceable, invisible. And for the first time, I felt the unmistakable sting of being cut out of something I created. A few days after the investor meeting, Ethan texted me out of nowhere, "Need you to sign some partnership paperwork." Nothing major. I remember staring at the message for a long moment, feeling that same uncomfortable twist in my stomach. When he arrived with a stack of documents under his arm, he acted like he was doing me a favor. "Standard stuff," he said, sliding the papers across my dining table. "Just sign where I highlighted. Investors need everything official." His voice was smooth, too smooth, and something in his overly casual tone made me suspicious. I started reading. At first, the legal jargon blurred together, but then the numbers hit me like a slap. Ethan had listed himself as 95% owner of the company, with me holding a token 5% service contribution share. And tucked deeper in the document was a clause stating that all code written in service of Ethan's vision would automatically become his sole intellectual property, no mention of my authorship whatsoever. My chest tightened. I looked up and asked, "Ethan, what is this?" His expression didn't shift at all. If anything, he looked bored. "Dude, it's fine," he said, waving a hand. "We both know I'm the brains behind this. You're the technical guy. This is how startups are structured." That sentence cracked something in me. I pressed the papers back toward him. "You want me to sign away everything I built?" He shrugged. You didn't build it alone. And honestly, if you don't want to sign, I'll just find someone else to recreate the code. Happens all the time. That was the moment the air left my lungs. Not just because he dismissed my work, but because he genuinely believed he could replace me, overwrite me, erase me. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply said, no. For a second, his confident smile flickered, like he hadn't expected pushback. But then he smirked again and said, your call, man. But don't come crying to me when you regret it. He walked out of my apartment like he'd already won. And I stood there, realizing this wasn't just betrayal, it was warfare. The fallout began faster than I expected. Within 2 days, my aunt called me, her voice sharp and disappointed. Why would you sabotage Ethan's big opportunity like that? She demanded before I could even say hello. I felt my throat tighten. What are you talking about? She launched into a rant about how Ethan told the whole family I'd gotten greedy and refused to sign simple paperwork because I wanted to control his company. Hearing those words, his company, was like salt in an open wound. I tried explaining the truth, but she cut me off. You've always been sensitive about his success. Let it go. Then she hung up. That call was the first of many. My cousin messaged me accusingly, my uncle sent a passive-aggressive voice note, and even my parents hinted that maybe I should compromise for the sake of family. It didn't matter what evidence I had, they all believed Ethan's version. I suddenly felt like I was being pushed out of my own narrative. Meanwhile, Ethan escalated quietly but effectively. One night, when I tried logging into our shared repos, I found everything locked. Access denied. He'd changed passwords, revoked permissions, and even deleted our shared workspace chat history. It was like he was wiping me out of existence. The silence of my apartment felt heavier than usual, illuminated only by the blue glow of my monitor as I sat there staring at the rejection notification. My hands trembled with a mix of fury and disbelief. I vented to one of my mentors the next day, laying out everything: Ethan's behavior, the documents, the lies. He listened without interrupting, then said the first helpful thing anyone had offered: document everything. Every line of code, every timestamp, every email. If he thinks he can steal your work, make sure he can't. His voice was steady, almost grounding. You built the foundation. That gives you power. That night, surrounded by the hum of my computer, I finally realized something Ethan didn't want me to remember. I never signed over a single right. I still owned everything he was trying to claim. And for the first time in weeks, a quiet, dangerous clarity settled in. I thought the worst had already happened until Ethan proved me wrong. One morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications, tags, messages, shares. Ethan had officially launched the app on social media, and he launched it under his name alone. No mention of me. No acknowledgement. Not even a vague "we." He uploaded polished graphics, a launch video, and a long caption about building this from scratch after years of hard work. My own code, my months of effort, my life-consuming nights, presented as his solo masterpiece. I sat there on my bed, phone shaking in my hand. I didn't even know when he'd gained access to the final build files. I clicked through comments, each one another cut. Ethan, you're a genius. You're going to be huge, man. This is incredible, can't believe you coded all this. Every word made my stomach knot tighter. By evening, I found out my family was throwing a surprise dinner to celebrate him. I wasn't invited. My own mother texted me, you should be happy for him, even if things are tense. Happy. For someone who had erased me entirely. I spent that night sitting on the floor of my dark living room, the only light coming from the city outside my window. My laptop screen reflected faintly in the glass, reminding me of the countless nights I'd hunched over it, believing this project meant something. I replayed Ethan's words, I'll just find someone else to recreate the code. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was replaceable. The lowest point came when I watched Ethan appear on a small tech podcast, confidently explaining his development process. Hearing him talk about algorithms he didn't even understand made something inside me break. I closed the video halfway through and just sat there, numb. Empty. For the first time, I wondered if staying silent would be easier than fighting. But as that thought lingered, something colder and sharper began forming beneath it, an anger that didn't shout, didn't thrash, didn't panic. It just waited, and it wasn't going anywhere. The morning after that podcast broke me in ways I didn't know I could break, I woke up with a strange, heavy stillness in my chest, like the quiet right before a storm. I sat at my desk, stared at my blank monitor, and whispered to myself, if he wants a war, I'll choose the battlefield. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment, trembling not with fear anymore, but with a cold, focused resolve. Then I opened a brand new project folder and typed the first line of code, my code, rebuilt from scratch, piece by piece. The sound of the keys felt like reclaiming my breath. By noon, I had already recreated the foundation that took me months the first time. Not because it was easy, because it was mine. I knew its structure, its flaws, its strengths, every decision I had made embedded like a fingerprint. As I worked, I made the app better, smoother transitions, cleaner architecture, more secure endpoints. I added features Ethan didn't even know I had been planning. The updated version felt like a quiet rebellion taking shape under my hands. Over the next few days, I tore through old emails, timestamps, commit histories, payment receipts, everything that proved my ownership. I printed them, backed them up, organized them, labeled them. My apartment turned into a war room, stacks of documentation on the table, whiteboard scribbles across the wall, my laptop running comparison logs in the background. Every detail strengthened my case. When I finally met with a tech lawyer, a calm, sharp woman who reviewed everything silently, she pushed her glasses up, looked at me, and said, "You realize he has no legal claim, right? You never transferred rights." I nodded, swallowing hard. Hearing it out loud felt like oxygen filling lungs I hadn't realized were starving. "Then what happens now?" I asked. She leaned back, tapping the stack of evidence. "What happens now," she said, "is whatever you decide. You own everything he's pretending to." Walking home from her office, the evening air felt different, cooler, lighter, charged. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt power shifting back toward me. And deep down, I knew Ethan had no idea what was coming next. I didn't go after Ethan impulsively. I waited until every piece of evidence was airtight, every timestamp lined up, every document numbered and cross-referenced. When I finally crafted the email to the angel investor, my hands didn't shake the way they used to. The subject line was simple, clarification regarding app ownership, but the attachments told the real story. I included side-by-side commit logs, version histories, payment proofs, and clear demonstrations that the foundational architecture existed long before Ethan ever pitched his vision. Before hitting send, I took a breath that tasted like something I hadn't felt in months: control. I expected silence, maybe a request for a meeting. What I didn't expect was an immediate reply. The investor responded within an hour, "We need to speak. This is serious." That alone told me he believed the evidence. 2 hours later, Ethan started blowing up my phone calls, texts, voice notes dripping with forced calm. "Hey man, I think there's some confusion. The investor said you reached out. Just call me back. We can fix this." Fix. As if I'd broken something by telling the truth. When I ignored him, the messages shifted: "You're overreacting. You're making yourself look bad. You're ruining everything." It was almost satisfying watching his confidence bleed into panic. I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to, but because silence was louder. More powerful. By evening, my parents called, their voices trembling. "Ethan just told us the investor froze funding," my mom said. "Why would he do that?" I told them the truth, slowly, calmly, letting each detail sink in. For the first time, they didn't interrupt. The silence on the other end of the line felt like a crack spreading across the polished image Ethan had built. Word traveled fast. Family chats lit up with screenshots. People compared my commit logs to Ethan's timelines. The narrative flipped almost overnight: the visionary had become a fraud, and the quiet coder he dismissed had the receipts to prove it. And as Ethan's startup began unraveling thread by thread, I realized this was only the beginning of his downfall. The next move would be mine. When I finally decided to go public, it wasn't about revenge, it was about truth having a place to stand. I spent an entire night assembling everything into a single, undeniable package: screenshots of our conversations, side-by-side comparisons of my repository versus his empty branches, timestamped video captures of me demonstrating the code months before he even drafted his pitch, and legal statements confirming ownership. I recorded a calm, steady voiceover walking through each piece, making sure it felt factual, not emotional. By sunrise, the video was ready. I hovered over the upload button on my channel for a long, still moment before clicking post. The reaction was explosive. Within hours, comments flooded in: developers, entrepreneurs, even people who had never coded a line in their lives, all calling out Ethan's manipulation. This is textbook theft. The audacity is insane. You carried the whole project. The thread grew so fast my notifications couldn't keep up. Tech forums picked it up next, analyzing the evidence like it was a case study in betrayal. Even a few mid-sized YouTubers made reaction videos calling Ethan a fraud. By noon, Ethan's name was trending locally on social media for all the wrong reasons. Ethan tried to respond with a shaky Instagram story, saying, "This is all just a misunderstanding." He helped, sure, but the vision was mine. But viewers immediately tore it apart. They paused frames, compared timelines, pointed out contradictions he didn't even realize he'd made. Someone commented, "He's lying faster than he can think." Another wrote, "How do you misunderstand committing fraud?" As the pressure mounted, sponsors backed out. Collaborators distanced themselves. The investor released a public statement freezing involvement pending ownership clarification, which everyone knew was corporate language for "we're out." Ethan's comments became a battlefield of receipts and rage. His polished facade shattered so completely it was almost surreal to watch. And in the middle of that digital storm, my phone buzzed with a final message from him, a single line dripping with desperation. "Please take it down. You're destroying me." But this wasn't destruction. It was exposure. And I hadn't even made my final move yet. I didn't respond to Ethan's message. Not out of cruelty, but because anything I said would have been wasted breath. Instead, I spent the next morning in the quiet of my apartment, finalizing the paperwork my lawyer had prepared. The ownership filings, licensing claims, and intellectual property documents were thick, organized, and ironclad. As I signed my name on each page, the pen felt heavier, not with guilt, but with the weight of finally taking back what had always been mine. When I handed everything to my lawyer, she glanced over it and said, "Once this is filed, the app belongs to you entirely." No contest. Finally, something in me exhaled. By late afternoon, my inbox pinged with messages from investors, real investors, people who had seen the viral expose and wanted to fund the improved version of the app. One message said, "We'd like to back the original creator, not the impersonator." Another wrote, "Your rebuild is cleaner and more scalable than Ethan's version ever could have been." Reading those lines felt surreal, like the universe was slowly stitching something back together. That evening, as I walked home, Ethan showed up outside my building. He looked nothing like the charismatic showman he pretended to be, no confidence, no swagger. Just fear. "Look, man. I'm sorry," he said, forcing a shaky laugh. "I messed up. I shouldn't have pushed you out. Maybe we can still. I don't know, partner?" His voice cracked in the middle, a plea creeping in. "We were family. I thought you'd understand the pressure I was under." I stared at him, really stared, at the desperation, at the cracks, at the sudden realization that he only came crawling back because he had lost everything. "You didn't make a mistake," I said quietly. "You made a choice." His shoulders slumped as the words landed. I walked past him and buzzed myself inside without looking back. The glass door closed between us with a soft thud that felt like closure. 2 days later, the paperwork finished processing, the app, its profits, rights, name, and future officially belonged to me. And as the notifications rolled in welcoming me to the next phase of development, I finally felt something I hadn't felt since the beginning. Control over my own creation. But the final chapter wasn't done yet. When the transfer of ownership officially went through, something inside me settled, like a storm finally breaking after months of suffocating pressure. I opened the updated version of the app on my monitor, watching it run smoother than ever, and for the first time, I didn't picture Ethan hovering beside me claiming it as his own. It was quiet in my apartment, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I leaned back in my chair and let myself breathe, really breathe, without the weight of someone else's ego pressed against my work. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like clarity. The first week after the launch was overwhelming in the best way possible. The improved app gained traction instantly, users praising its design, investors scheduling meetings, reporters contacting me directly. One email read, "You've built something beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Another said, "Your story inspired me to stand up for my own work." I didn't expect the validation to matter, but it did, more than I wanted to admit. Every message stitched back a part of me I didn't realize Ethan had torn. Meanwhile, Ethan went completely silent. His social media accounts dried up. The startup pages were deleted. Family members who once defended him now tiptoed around the topic, unsure how to reconcile the fraud they'd celebrated. A few reached out, offering awkward apologies, but I kept my replies short. "Thanks. I'm moving forward." And the boundary didn't need to be loud to be firm. One night, my mother called softly, almost hesitant. "We're proud of you," she said. "Truly." I let the words sink in, not as validation, but as closure. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. A week later, I walked to the rooftop of my building, the city buzzing beneath me, the air crisp and unburdened. I thought about everything, about Ethan, about myself, about how close I came to disappearing from my own life's work. And then it hit me, simple and sharp, I didn't win because I destroyed him, I won because I reclaimed what was always mine. As the wind moved across the skyline, I whispered the truth Ethan never understood: no one gets to take credit for the life you build with your own hands.